Welcome to another episode of Political Pitchforks on AM 1280 The Patriot. I'm your co-host, Jeremy Munson, a former state representative, and here with us, as usual, is Susan Sjogren-Smith, a longtime political activist. And in studio, we're excited to have Michele Tafoya, candidate for U.S. Senate. And it's getting to be it was a crowded field. There's a lot of energy and excitement, especially around how much this race could bring in for campaign dollars to help all Republicans, really up and down the ticket. That's why, selfishly, as a state Senate candidate, I want to win a trifecta in Minnesota. I want to help win the governor's race. I want to win a legislative majority in the House and Senate. And to do that, we need to have a coordinated effort with everyone on the ticket, up and down the ballot, and a U.S. Senate race like yours, which is it's in the cards. I mean, it's one of the few nationwide that is in play. Yeah. And it's an open Senate seat, which just rings the bell that this is our chance. Your race could bring in lots of money. So I'm excited to have you in studio to talk about
Should I get on my wallet now and just hand you everything I have? Or?
Let's do it.
There's not much in there, I must warn you, in my personal wallet.
Yeah, so a few disclosures. Susan is helping the Royce White campaign, which I did last cycle. My goal is to help every candidate become a better candidate through the endorsement and support the endorsed candidate. Also, I'm not a sports fan. So I didn't know who you were, so I had to Google you. But so many people I talk to who are even not political know you, and so you have a great name ID in the state, which I think does help. So, Michele, introduce yourself to the listeners who don't know you, and tell us why you're running.
Well, if you don't know me, it's Michele Tafoya. I've lived in Minnesota over half my life, married a guy raised in Minnesota. We've raised our kids here. My kids are now 20 and 17, and for many, many years, and I think we can go back to 9/11, really, I've been concerned about the fragility of our country, number one, and then watching a state that I moved to and fell in love with many, many moons ago, consistently in decline over the last 10 years or so. Just consistent. I mean, it breaks my heart. Mm-hmm. It angers me, because it doesn't have to be this way. And so rather than continue to, everyone always says this, stop griping about it, get off the sidelines and do something about it. I had a great career in sports. For those who don't know, I covered the college basketball and football, covered the NFL for many years. I was on Monday Night Football, Sunday Night Football. So I worked with John Madden and Al Michaels on Mondays, and then Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth on Sundays. For many years, we were the number one show on television, and covered the Olympics many times. And it was a great job, great career, loved it. But something bigger was calling. And I don't mean to say that sports isn't important and a great part of the fabric of American life. Even in sports, I started to see politics pulling us apart. And that made me sad.
Especially in sports.
Well,
yeah,
in a
lot of ways.
You're talking about like kneeling for
all of those, kneeling for the anthem, which is, again, I'm a big freedom of speech absolutist. They're entitled to do what they want, but it broke my heart. It still can be heartbreaking. Two things can be true. Right. You can have the right to say it or express it, and I can have the right to be very, very sad about it. And I was. So watching my kids grow up in this, seeing America and really Minnesota changing, I thought, I can't leave it like this for them, or at least I've got to try to do something. My kids are the two most important people in my life, and I tell them that. And my daughter has said to me, I get that, Mom, but then if we're so important, why are you doing this? And it's like, well, because you're so important. I got to do this.
I think every mom who's in this fight has that same issue. Yeah. Probably dads too, but I think moms get it not just from their kids, but from the community who know them, saying, your kids, you should be focusing differently. And I think whether you're working or doing politics, it's just a real deal.
So it's all of those things. I just constantly had this almost physical pull to do something. And so I left my great career. And as my husband said, you and I could have walked off into the sunset together, and here you are. And he jokes.
You still might. Just give us time. Fix it. We'll fix it, and then you will.
We'll fix it, and then we'll walk off into an even more beautiful sunset, is my hope. So everyone's on board, and I feel supported, and this is why I'm doing it. This isn't about a career. This isn't about padding my resume. This isn't about power. This is about bringing the state and the country back to a place that is happy and prosperous and peaceful and wonderful and patriotic.
Yeah. Well, in congratulations on winning the NRSC endorsement. I believe that you were endorsed right out of the gate, or there's an indication that they're supporting you.
Yeah.
Because that endorsement could mean $10 to $20 million coming into the state, again, to help all Republicans up and down the ballot. There are some other groups out there like the Club for Growth and such that are also equally weighted in fundraising ability. But in order to win this race, unfortunately, it isn't just grassroots dollars because you have to go up against all the unions and everything else on the Democrat side, and because the former chair of the Democrat state party is the national chair. It's almost like it's a personal thing for him to make sure that they win Minnesota. So there's going to be a lot of money nationally coming in on the Democrat side.
No question. And we're going to continue to make this a national race. We have to. All the other Senate races are national too. I would submit this. It's going to be really expensive to win Texas and Georgia and Michigan. We have a chance to do something here because we have an open seat that might not be quite as expensive, but it will be expensive. So we do need the funding.
I think this is a really important issue, and I just want to raise this. We know in Minnesota we never have money. We never have the money to fight the Democrat machine in any way. It's not even close. And one of the concerns I have is when the national dollars get tossed in as like a lure, right? There are people who think, well, if the seat is so important, whether you win or Schwarzy or any of the candidates, Royce, if they spent money in Minnesota on that race, I think any of our candidates could win based on the circumstances that are facing us. But my guess is they won't support everybody. They'll support you. And if you aren't the candidate, they may not. And then it's not really about how important the seat is. Then it's about ideology. And I think that's
I don't think it's about ideology. I think it's about winning.
But we can win, I think. We are, this is, I think, and we don't need to spend a lot of time on it, but I think this idea that we have, if we run the right races and if we have the support, these races aren't that far apart anyways. And now we have a whole different set of issues on our table with the fraud. I mean, so many things are being disclosed. So I think this is a year that no matter what, they should be coming in. And I'm hoping that no matter who wins the primary, right? Who knows, maybe we won't even get an endorsement because of the competition. That could happen. That all the candidates after the primary will support that candidate. That I think that's going to be critical. That we have a history of candidates who lose disappearing. But actually, if it's really about the state, every one of you should be called on to literally become the biggest supporter of whoever wins.
I would extend that to the voters as well. I see some people in the state house and all over in politics, and I think to myself, how did these people get elected? Right. And the only answer I can come up with is that the other side isn't voting. And you do hear a lot of that disenfranchisement on the road when I'm sure you hear it too. Yeah. How are we going to overcome this? How are we going to overcome? We got to start by actually voting and feel as though your vote matters. And that's so important. We're hearing stats about numbers of people who are disenfranchised, who don't vote. We can overcome these numbers if we just bump these up. But I do believe you've got to have the candidates who can win in the general. And I don't think just anyone can win on the issues. I don't believe that. I think that you've got to have the right people. That's why you've got such a vast number of people running for governor. You've got to find the right person to beat the Democrat. And so it's more than it is the issues for sure. But you've got to have someone who can address those issues and convince these voters that their vote is going to get them across the finish line.
Well, we're going to get into some of the policies. You are a different candidate, not just in your celebrity, but we're going to talk about your issue on life and guns and economics and business environment here for our state in the next segment as we get into more details about your campaign. So, again,
I think that this is one of the most important shows we've done because there's no question across the state this Senate race is equally as important to people as the governor's race. And I think we are going to have one of the best, debate cycles that we've had in Minnesota, bringing more people to the table than we have in a long time. I just think it's really critically important that we have these different perspectives. So we are talking issues. And I think that's what we want to do on Political Pitchforks is we want to really talk about these issues and show people the diversity of a candidate despite individual positions, right?
Yep.
So thanks for being here, and we look forward to being back in a few minutes.
Okay, let's begin.
Welcome back to Political Pitchforks on AM 1280 The Patriot. We are here talking with Michele Tafoya, a candidate for U.S. Senate here in Minnesota. Michele, one of the topics that comes up a lot with delegates. So first of all, I'm a state delegate, so is Susan, and we have a state convention at the end of May where we hope to endorse a candidate for U.S. Senate. One of the questions that comes up a lot from delegates when I talk about you is, well, she's pro-choice. And I grew up in a Democrat household, so I had a journey to find my pro-life position, and it happened when my wife was pregnant with my first daughter. It's just seeing my daughter on the screen. I don't even know how many weeks along it was, but it was a moment for me where that's a child. I mean, it was clear to me. I saw a quote that was put out by Michael Broadcorb. Went back and found one of your old podcasts where he says, quotes you saying, "I remember telling my mom years ago, the one hill I would die on and go to Washington in March is if they try to take away a women's right to choose." Mm-hmm. So this quote, and I just full disclosure, Michael Broadcorb used to be a Republican. I question whether he is anymore. I know that the state party and David Hand put him on the payroll, so he might be working for David Hand and just, being all about him for his candidacy for U.S. Senate. But I'd like you to explain that quote, if it's true, and what your position is and what the boundaries are on your right to choose.
Yeah, there are boundaries, and I appreciate the question because you're asking me now and not somebody else who's writing what they're writing. And I very well could have said that when I was about 18 years old, but here's the deal. There are a couple things we need to remember when we're talking about this issue. I'm in line with President Trump on this. So if people voted for President Trump and support him on this issue, then they should have no problem voting for me. Number two, it is no longer a federal issue, and we all know that. This has been kicked back to the states with the Dobbs decision. And so the Senate this is not in the Senate's purview. Now, you could talk about, well, it could come back. Anything could happen. But at this moment, it is not in the Senate's purview. So my position on this does not affect. Here's where I will be an ally in the Senate. I am all about confirming conservative, strict constructionist judges. And I am all about voting against taxpayer-funded abortion. So my stance is not the stance of the Minnesota laws as they exist, which I believe are awful and they go too far.
They're barbaric.
They're barbaric. I am within the first 12 weeks. And certainly there are going to be a lot of people on both sides who argue with me for a variety of reasons on either of those directions. Now, I will say this, too, to you when we talk about having children. I had a terrible time getting and staying pregnant. And all my husband and I wanted to do was have a family. And we tried in vitro. We did a number of things. Ultimately, finally, naturally, by the grace of God, I had my son, who is now 20. And after I had my son, my husband came to me and he said, now we get to adopt. So we adopted our baby girl from Bogota, Colombia in South America. And I have not yet met her mother, her biological mother, because I am her mother. But I would thank her up and down for having this child and for us being able to raise her. And yeah, I do get a little emotional because she's a gift. So having said all of that, women face difficult decisions all the time. And, if people want to say Republicans are going to take abortion away, they want to ban it. That's just not where I am. I'm not about banning abortion. I think my position helps us broaden the tent for a lot of people, including independents in the general.
Okay. But to clarify, and then you said 12 weeks. Mm-hmm. So like even like France and some other countries in Europe, I think they have a tight restriction after 12 weeks or something, no abortion. Mm-hmm. There has to be some reasonable restriction on abortion.
Yeah,
what we have in Minnesota is basically we have fourth trimester abortion. So after they're born alive, to just let them die on the table.
That sickens me. And that was done in a very underhanded way. If there's a botched abortion, it seems to me they just kind of took away a physician's duty to care for that child.
Yeah.
that's not right.
And in Minnesota, we removed most of the licensing requirements for abortionists. So, and we don't track it anymore. So we're not even recording how many abortions there are.
Like I said, we've just gone way too far in Minnesota. And so I would encourage every delegate and every voter to press their gubernatorial candidates, their state house and their state Senate candidates on what they're going to do about it in the state of Minnesota. Again, wouldn't be in my purview in the United States Senate, but I do not like the laws as they exist in Minnesota because they seem to be just non-existent.
Well, I think there are concerns. There are organizations around the country that provide free ultrasounds. And I think the issue of ultrasounds as a part of informed consent on this issue, I think, is actually a very big deal. And I think that some of those issues may continue to arise because of people do have a need to know the action they're taking today because of the consequences down the road. Because often people really don't understand. They don't know actually what stage they're at, this issue of dating and making sure that. So I think that's an issue. Also, I think parental consent. And I'd like you to talk about some of those issues because in Minnesota, as you know, we have parents have almost no rights once a child becomes a teenager. Everything is
when
in
you
play.
Say a teenager, what's the age? What's the actual age?
I mean, I'm going to say in Minnesota, children have the right to get birth control without their parents' knowledge. I don't even think there's a bottom age at all. I mean, I think I've talked to parents whose kids were 10 years old getting birth control. And so I think
that's anecdotal and that's interesting. I'd like to know what the law is.
I think it's like 14 or 15. The doctor asks you to leave the exam room, and I think at 16. We can't even make an appointment for our daughter.
You can't get medical records of a 13-year-old. I have children. I cannot get their medical records without their permission.
I had to. For me, it was when my son turned 18 that the medical records were no longer in my purview.
It's before that now.
And actually, if you go online, like you won't be able to see actually any details. It's so, and I think kids get them through the schools. It might be that's when the doctor asks you to leave the room. I worked with a mom in my former job when I worked at Pacer Center as an advocate. And there was a mom who had, I think, a 12-year-old that was getting Depo-Provera shots that they didn't know. And she got sick, actually. So I think there's just a lot of things that happen. So I think these are the issues that could become an issue federally in terms of parental rights. And we're seeing that with the transgender issue and things like that. These are really serious issues because children get harmed and they can't turn to their parents.
I'm absolutely right there with you on parental rights. Yeah. Being a parent myself and having seen my kids through a number of things and keeping them in your home until they are legal adults, right? So if they're in your home until they're legal adults, then it seems to me, call me crazy or old-fashioned, I'm still the parent. And what they do and what they bring home and what they're taking and what they're seeing and doing in school should matter to every parent, and it certainly matters to me. And I have felt a little bit shunned at times. Again, I don't want to get into the tyranny of the anecdote here, but we all have our stories about what we've seen and what we've heard. No, look, parental rights are so massively important to me that the notion that the state gets a bigger say over your kid or the teachers union gets a bigger say over your kid or the school is so 1984 to me. You know, I'm talking about the book, obviously. Yeah. It's frightening. And this should not be. We're raising our kids.
Right.
We gave birth to our kids. We adopted our kids. We are putting every ounce of love and care and attention, and everything we do is for our kids. And so for anyone to try to step in and say, we know better, with very few rare extenuating circumstances, right, is to me is just, it goes against everything I believe in as a parent.
Well, at the state legislature in Minnesota, the Democrats are always trying to expand the scope of what government is doing to take over your children in the hopes of equity, right? This is what they're always pushing is it's not about equality and having equal opportunity. It's about equal outcomes, which is what equity is about. And it's just making sure that all parenting is the same and that they want to just back the school bus up to the nursery and take your kids earlier and earlier and educate them. And then I was on a call with all these school counselors. They want to be able to talk about your kids' sexuality and everything else in the schools, and to get them counseling without parental consent. And it's a big issue. We have to continue to push back on parental rights, and this cuts across political spectrums.
No question.
If you want to win statewide in Minnesota, parental rights is a really important issue that a lot of Democrats are not finding a home for in the Democrat Party.
It's also rather astonishing to me that anyone could believe that any other system, like the government or the state or the schools, could promote or provide actual equity for these kids. Like, you can actually make that happen? No, you can't. Because if you're doing that, if you believe that you can turn out equitable outcomes for every kid, then every kid has to start out the same, and that's not where we are. And then to try to make them the same, you're going to have to push some kids down, bring some kids up, and apply this bizarre template to all children, which is like the furthest thing from freedom that I can imagine.
So just, I looked it up quick, beauty of technology. Yeah. On Minnesota statute 144.343, pregnancy, VD, alcohol or drug abuse, abortion, subdivision 1, minor's consent valid. Any is the word any. Minor may give effective consent for medical, mental, and other health services to determine the presence of or to treat pregnancy and conditions associated therewith. VD, alcohol, other drug abuse, consent of no other person is required. Any minor. It actually says any.
That is so frightening that they did that, and passing the abortions for all legislation, which had no age part and no parental,
We're conveniently forgetting that people's brains don't fully develop until they're about 23 to 25 years old.
Exactly.
And so to entrust kids to make these massive life decisions on their own, whatever the decision might be, whatever direction it might go, but to do that unaccompanied by someone who loves them and somebody who cares for them and is responsible for them.
This isn't like what color pants you wear. This is these are life-altering choices.
This applies to the trans issue as well.
Right?
Yeah. All right, well, you're listening to Political Pitchforks on AM 1280 The Patriot. We'll be back in a couple minutes with Michele Tafoya's campaign for U.S. Senate. Thank you for tuning in.
Okay, let's begin.
Welcome back to Political Pitchforks on AM 1280 The Patriot. Jeremy Munson with Susan Smith, and we're interviewing U.S. Senate candidate Michele Tafoya. I get a lot of text messages in this campaign cycle. I get messages from Trump, from Michael Johnson, the Speaker of the House. Hey, this is Michael Johnson, and I got a message last night. This is Michele Tafoya. Tune in for my interview with Riley Gaines.
I thought you were talking about personal texts from Mike Johnson.
I thought they were. I do have several congressmen in my phone, when I get a message from Thomas Massey. Like, hey, this is Thomas Massey. I'm like, no, that's not your number. But I got a message from your campaign about this town hall with Riley Gaines. Mm-hmm. I have two daughters in sports who were with us here in the studio, and keeping boys out of women's sports is an important issue, not just for Republicans but for Democrats. And it's crazy. They play volleyball. I have seen mixed where the volleyball teams have a boy, and man, they can jump high. They can hit hard. It seems unfair, especially when we're talking college scholarships and stuff. So the interview with Riley Gaines was really impressive. She's just been a great advocate for this issue.
Yeah.
Obviously, you are supportive of her and this issue. You want to talk a little bit about it?
She was one of my first podcast hosts. When I first left the NFL and I started doing my podcast, I admired her so greatly. And the issue to me, like just at the beginning of this, when you said keeping boys out of girls' sports, I thought just that phrase,
right?
Like that we're talking about this is just extraordinary and not in a good way.
It's one of those slippery slope things that people say is never going to happen.
And here it is.
That happened.
And not only did it happen, it's happening more. And it's sort of like we're going, seeing it increase before we. So when I was a kid, Title IX got passed. And I was one of three daughters. And then my brother was the oldest of our four kids. And my dad came to me, and he had many, many sisters. And he said to me, this is huge. And you're going to get to do things that your mom and your aunties never got to do. And I was thinking, wow, mom never got to, there weren't teams for girls? What the heck? Mm-hmm. Now we're in this upside down world. It's the only way I can talk about it. My husband, who was a college athlete at the University of Minnesota, and his sister was as well. They're both incredibly talented. I was never that talented. But when he and I talk about it, he's in disbelief that this is a conversation.
Right.
And it's for all the reasons you just talked about. It's unfair. It's just wrong. The opportunities for girls. I mean, we could go on and on and on about it, but it's like, what was Title IX for if not to give girls a fair shot at competing in sports and in other areas, by the way? And I would contend to both of you that there's no way I have a career in sports broadcasting without Title IX, because it introduced me to sports. It made me a part of it. I was able to learn and do all those things that I tried to picture my mom, back in the 40s and 50s doing, and it never would have happened. So I also meet with a lot of women who are in the C-suites, CEOs, CFOs, whatever the role may be. So many of them, like a high percentage, have a sports background. And that's where they learn teamwork and they learn, how to work toward a common goal and all these things.
But it's also where they learn to lose and get back up.
Well,
it's where you learn to lose and get back up.
Unless you're the Minnetonka boys hockey team that wouldn't get up off the ice after they lost in overtime. And that's sad too. No, that's really sad too.
No, it is really sad.
Like, get up, go stand on the medal podium, accept it. This is what competition is about. Somebody has to lose.
Right.
This is what competition is about. But separating these out, I mean, I've covered sports for long enough, and I will unapologetically say, men and women are different, and we have different skills and different strengths. And so therefore, this whole, I am almost exhausted about repeating the same facts and figures and realities that exist surrounding this topic. There's just no reason for this.
Well, it's almost as though, I think I grew up in a sports family, and I was 4 when Title IX passed, and I had 4 brothers, and I could play with the boys everywhere but on the teams. Because even though it passed, it didn't really change a lot immediately. Like it was an
certainly
immediate
not
fix.
overnight, right?
And so to me, I just think when competition is so important, and it's important both in the winning and the losing side, because you need to learn to be a gracious winner also. And I actually think the sports ethic is critical in politics. And I think a lot of people in politics actually weren't athletes. There's a lot of people that weren't athletes and they don't understand it. And I think that it's this issue of competition, and you come to a competition, a campaign, a vote on an issue, and you fight it out. And then when it's over and people follow the rules, in sports especially, you see this. If people follow the rules, even when they lose, they get it. But when someone cheats, when there's fraud, they will never be respected. If you are one of those players that cheats and people see it.
I'd like to just repeat one phrase you said. When there's fraud, you will never be respected. I just wanted to single that out.
That's right.
For the purposes of
politics.
The broader conversation.
Yeah. And I think that is where we are really struggling. And I do think in the transgender issue, I think a lot of the people that have pushed this issue are people who really weren't involved in sports, weren't athletes, don't understand the issue. And it's more the psychology side of things and the mental health and wanting everybody to feel happy and accepted. It's why we don't have a hockey tournament where War Road, goes against Edina all the time. We have 63 different things so everybody can get a trophy. And I think it's changed sports not for the better.
Yeah.
And you still have the competitors and you still have, but it's a serious issue. And I wish that this ethic of sports and winning and playing by rules, and if you don't like the rules, there's a process to change rules in politics and in sports. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, they're changing the rules in sports wrongly. They're not listening.
Yeah, and this is under the guise of inclusion when in fact it is exclusionary for girls. For girls to think that in order to make this team, I might have to beat out a boy. I thought this was the girls' volleyball team. I thought this was the girls' track and field team.
Right.
And then all of the ancillary things that go along with it, like sharing the locker room and all of those kinds of things, which just it's a bizarre sort of, again, I'll refer to 1984, 2 plus 2 equals 5 kind of argument that is being made that is really, come on, let's be intellectually honest about this and not just force this ideology because it's an ideology and it's not based in science or fact or fairness or truth.
And maybe that's part of the idea of teaching children and people not to think.
It completely is.
There you go.
All right.
Bigger agenda, Jeremy, you go.
Yeah, I want to steer the conversation to another topic that delegates really want to know about, and that's where you stand on guns. Mm-hmm. I grew up in rural Minnesota in a hunting family, but my dad didn't own a handgun until I was an adult, and so he is a Democrat. He's come along. He came a long way. He's passed now, but understanding why we have the Second Amendment. It's not about hunting. For me, it's about making sure if we have an armed populace that the government won't continue to take away our rights. That's the line. So
you kind of, I think it's a little scary right now. Like, we're looking at the situation in Iran. Bear with me for a second. And these people have been mowed down by their own government. And they're meeting this moment now where they're going to have this window of opportunity to stand up for themselves and fight for their freedom. But they're unarmed.
Right.
And so how do they do that when they have no way to defend themselves? So I just want people to think about that. That, to me, is what the Second Amendment is about. It's about having Americans be able to stand up to some sort of tyranny. And so that, in a nutshell, is why I am.
The very idea that the intent of the Second Amendment was so that people could hunt.
It was not for hunting.
Let's just be clear.
Yeah.
It is impossible, because if that were the reason for them and you had to have a right, people would have famished all across the North. It's
I get
impossible.
It, but I go to Republican
crazy.
gubernatorial debates, and they'll stand up and they'll talk about their 2 minutes about the guns, and people say, I support the Second Amendment, I'm a hunter. And I want to say, this has nothing to do with hunting.
Nothing
Sit
to do
down,
with
sit
it.
down, sit down.
Yeah.
You don't get it. You don't get it.
Right.
So your description of why they need to have an armed populace in Iran, or Democrats talking about how we need Ukrainian citizens to be given AR-15s. It's like, wait a minute, are you serious? yes, and yes.
For gun rights everywhere but here.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So they
Yes.
understand it in the context of what happens in Ukraine.
Right.
If everybody had a gun over there, the Russians wouldn't invade. Yes, you're correct.
First thing a tyrant does.
Yeah.
Take the guns.
Take the
Right.
guns.
That's right.
So,
Take the guns.
so that's important. Somebody had circulated a quote saying that you were supportive of red flag laws, and for me, I've got a T-shirt on today that says, "Should the government?" Nope.
Glad I didn't wear mine today.
Do you have one too?
Of course.
Oh, you could have been matching.
Yeah, that's
for
why.
me, red flag laws are guilty until you're proven innocent. So it's somebody, some random person, your
Right.
doctor saying, I don't think Michelle should have guns, and then the police showing up and taking away guns. You've not been accused of a crime. You've not, there's no due process. They're taking away your gun until you can prove you're innocent. And most judges are going to side on the safety and say, well, boy, I'd hate for her to shoot her husband the next day after I give her guns back. So it's safer for me just to say no. So where are you on red flag
Yeah,
laws?
it's a really nuanced issue, because I think that people look at incidents like Annunciation. Let's just start there. And you see the videos of this perpetrator, this person who committed the atrocities there ahead of time, and you think, how did that person get a hold of these weapons? How did no one intervene, seeing what they've seen of this person since? So it is very nuanced, and I don't claim to have the answer on each specific individual aspect of this, or each individual case. But for example, just for the point of discussion,
Yep.
what would you do in an instance like that? If you were this person's uncle and you saw these videos on Facebook or wherever of this kid writing initials and playing with bullets, and what would you do?
I think the root of most of this of the violence and anger in this country is rooted in mental health problems. We have a serious mental health issue.
Right. So we see that this kid on video appears to be mentally unstable and is playing with guns and bullets and doing what he was doing.
Yep.
What do you do?
Well, I think we need to get that person help. We have existing laws that would be able to put them in a 72-hour hold for psychological examinations. But let's talk about this more after the break. For mental health crisis,
Yes.
and perhaps the pharmaceutical industry being at fault for some of these drugs. You're listening to AM 1280 The Patriot, Political Pitchforks. We'll be back after the break.
Okay, let's begin.
Welcome back to Political Pitchforks. I am Susan Smith here with Jeremy Munson, and this morning we also have Michele Tafoya on. And I think we want to just wrap up this gun issue and the issue with mental health. And I just want to sort of posit that there are parents all across the state in this country who know their children have mental health issues, and there just isn't help available. People beg for help and they don't get it. And some of these children end up being children who use weapons, not just guns, to harm people. And I think we can't lose sight of this issue. And I maybe like to talk about parents and the need to be heard.
Yeah. So much of mental health, I think, has been just here, take a pill. That's not necessarily the right answer. So much of mental health is just affirm what the person is feeling. I'll go to a quick story. When I was a teenager, I was anorexic, and I got down to just skeletal body weight. And my parents didn't say, "Oh, great, you look great, and by the way, let's get you a tummy tuck and give you some Dexatrin." They did not affirm my body dysmorphia. They did not affirm it. They saw that it was a problem, and they got me counseling. And I was very fortunate to have parents who saw that and made sure I got counseling and doctor's attention.
I want to say as an aside note, this is really important for people to understand. The euthanasia bill did not pass in Minnesota a couple of years ago that Kelly Morrison put forward. But in other parts of the country, there have been euthanasia bills put forward that actually include anorexia as a reason where doctors would be obliged to inform a child, a teenager, an adult, that is a reason that they could kill themselves. To have just so you know that is actually one of the new additions. So go ahead.
Oh, okay. So, I mean,
sorry.
No, we're living in a place. We didn't grow up in this life, right. And here we are in it. But anyhow, the point being that mental health is so multifaceted, and there's such a vast array of mental health issues, and each individual human needs to get that attention if they so need it. And a lot of it does result in violence to others or to themselves. And we can't overlook this. Right. And we can't overlook some of the things in society that are feeding into this mental health, what I would call a crisis among our young people. And I think certainly these devices have a lot to do with it as well.
Yeah, so, definitely we have some issues with depression, and I think there's an overprescription of pharmaceuticals. There's some pretty damaging pharmaceuticals. A lot of the school shooters, of course, have been trans, and the media has tried to cover a lot of that up. But a lot of these school shooters have been on prescription drugs that are really messing with
and they're not
chemical
tested
balance.
on children. They have no idea how these drugs will affect children and hormones and all, changing bodies and all these things. No idea.
So before I get hammered by all the Second Amendment people, would you vote no on restrictions on magazine capacity, or if there's a national ban on AR-15s and things like that? Would you vote no on those bills?
Let me just say this. I know these are all really important questions, but they're also hypothetical. And so it would depend on exactly what is in that bill. No, I am not. Look, people have the right to bear arms for the reasons that we discussed. And so if you start to restrict that is a slippery slope. You mentioned that earlier. And I don't like that idea. So again, I've had very good conversations with people on the other side of the aisle who feel very differently about this. But this is one where if you start to infringe on people's Second Amendment rights, that is a trend that is probably going to go in a direction that is not pro 2A. And so that would be my instinct.
Okay. Let's jump to another topic that's important. The $200 billion they're asking for the war in Iran. What's your position on this war? I mean, you can support the troops while also questioning the reasons why we're going there and perhaps how much of a distraction it is for us. For me, we're $39 trillion in debt. We can't afford another forever war, and here we are.
Well, we don't know that this is a forever war. I don't have any evidence yet that this is a forever war. The president has said very firmly he's not for forever wars, and neither am I. I support our troops, and I support this decision. I mean, call me a little old-fashioned, but when a regime in a foreign country puts our kids in Arlington Cemetery, when he puts them in Walter Reed, permanently maimed, when I say he, I mean the Ayatollah, the regime, then we have every right to go after their military and their leadership. And so I applaud the president on doing this on his schedule, his time frame, his reasoning before these monsters get a nuclear weapon. So to just say that this is a forever war, I don't see the evidence of that yet. So far, everything we're hearing is we're going to make this weeks, not months. And so I support funding that. I don't want anyone tying the hands of this president to finish this job. This job needs to be finished. And our military has done an exceptional job so far. And this president has done what so many before him didn't have the guts to do or the will to do. And so I say finish the job. Let's support them. This is a monstrous regime, and they have been chanting death to America for over 50 years. And so before they get that nuclear weapon to do with what they will, I say take it down.
But I think for a lot of people, what's very difficult about this is, we've got this UN that is supposed to have some kind of oversight, but of course Iran does never let them in, right? They don't know that nobody can verify anything, and when they're boasting, hypothetically, that they're almost where they can create the weapon, they're almost there, and nobody can access what's really going on. Are they lying or not? But it's like if somebody called you on the phone and said, "I'm coming to kill you," right? I'm coming to kill you. Are you going to go, "Oh, they're not here yet"? I mean, this is really, and I'm not saying I want us to go into war, because actually I think these are, how hard to be the person actually that's going to be blamed either way. Whether, Trump doesn't take action and something happens, then he failed. And if he takes action, people don't believe it needed to happen. So it's, to be that person is something unimaginable, I think, for virtually everybody but the president of the United States.
And none of us have access to the intel that all the decision makers, the commanders, have. And that the president has.
I mean, I listened to the interview with Joe Kent on Tucker Carlson, and I mean, this is the guy that was the director of the the Anti-Counterterrorism Task Force or whatever. Right. He had access to all this information, and he said that that Iran did not have. There wasn't an imminent threat last year.
I would just push back and say that's one voice, and
making an interpretation of intelligence,
and not every. I don't know. Again, it's the. I realize that he did what he felt was right. That's his prerogative. But he's one guy.
Okay. Well, Israeli Prime Minister, I think today, said that now Iran has no possibility of even refining or enhancing or enriching uranium. So that program is done. The imminent threat is done. Can we pack up and come home, or are we going to stay there and install a new regime?
Well, I don't think that the president is saying, hey, until you get your Declaration of Independence launched and all of that, we're going to stay. No. No, again, people are saying we don't want another forever war. I don't see the evidence. Where's the evidence that this is a forever war? I don't see it yet.
And by the way, I think if it doesn't shift quickly, I think many people will abandon the idea of giving these people the opportunity to be free. Some of the most interesting discussions that happened on the news were actually the interviews with people from Iran that lived there before it was taken over, and their discussion about how they infiltrated the universities and sort of mined up the kids. And we see that in America. And they were warning America, be ready. They did it to us. Iran used to be free. It's a tragedy. There's no question. But we can't police the whole world. Yeah. And Trump is literally testing the limits of his support. I mean, this is just, we have to be honest. Testing the limits.
I'll just say this. Sure. I have a hard enough time selling freedom to Democrats.
Right.
And trying to teach children how great it is to live in a free society. Right. For me to go to Iran and try to teach them to appreciate freedom and democracy and how this works, it's going to be
wait a minute. I don't think that's the goal here.
We want them to have free elections and elect.
No, we want them to determine their future, and so that's another part of this. I don't hear the president saying we're going to have troops there until they've written a new constitution. I haven't heard that. Right. I haven't heard that at all. Look, we saw Venezuela was very short. I don't think anyone's in this wants this to be a forever war, and I don't see evidence of that. What I see is a regime that has been saying death to America for 50 years, and everyone's agreed we cannot let them get a nuclear weapon, but nothing was really concretely done to prevent that until now.
The only reason we should be there is the threat.
All right.
To us.
We this goes really fast. We'd love to have you back again as you get closer to the convention. How can people get involved with your campaign? What's your website?
MicheleTafoya.com. It's MICHELE, one L in Michelle, TAFOYA.com. You can probably misspell it and still get directed there. I think we have ways of that on the internet. But MicheleTafoya.com, you can volunteer, you can donate. We appreciate any and all support that we can get.
Great.
We believe we're the winning candidate. Due respect.
Yeah. No, that's all right.
I follow your socials. You're doing a good job getting messaging out. So thank you. And thank you to everybody listening in for another episode of Political Pitchforks on AM 1280 The Patriot.